Much has happened with the prosecution of Bryan Kohberger for the death of 4 University of Idaho students in Moscow, Idaho. The court has not yet set a trial date, but in this hearing that we're going to be covering today, we will hear the attorneys arguing over setting that trial date. They are now arguing about dates in the summer of 2025. There has also been ongoing discovery arguments about DNA, about what the prosecution needs to turn over. The defense has made numerous motions, some which will be addressed in the hearing we're seeing, some that will get set over for another date, including a motion to change venue, saying that the trial cannot be held in Moscow, Idaho, because they cannot find an impartial jury pool. That hearing has been set out for another date. We will see all those dates in this hearing today. So this court hearing, they are going to cover more about discovery. They are going to cover more about dates. They are going to talk about Bryan Kohberger's appeal of the last hearing that we watched, where the court denied the motion to reconsider overturning the indictment in the Kohberger case. The Supreme Court has since denied that motion to overturn the indictment. Remember, Kohberger was arguing that the indictment needed to be overturned because the grand jury was instructed wrong. Where have we seen that? Baldwin, arguing that the grand jury was instructed wrong because they were told the standard for the grand jury was probable cause not beyond a reasonable doubt. The standard in every jurisdiction across the United States is probable cause. The argument is that Utah law, back at the time of the Magna Carta, codified jury and not a difference between grand and petite jury. And so a trial jury is beyond a reasonable doubt, ergo a grand jury is beyond a reasonable doubt. That's oversimplifying their argument, but this is an argument that's been cropping up in Idaho. I imagine what we will see is the legislature just codifying this into the code so that it's no longer coming up, or the courts will eventually take one of these cases and say, no, just no. And the Supreme Court has said that multiple times, but it still is coming up. So we're going to see all of those arguments and see what the court rules on today in Idaho. There has been a ton of activity on the docket. All of it is sealed. All of it is sealed. Motions arguing over discovery, motions arguing over what's getting turned over, and a date being set for a new alibi to be turned over. And we're going to learn more about that, hopefully, in this hearing. I'm optimistic, y'all. I'm optimistic that we're going to find out about that in this hearing. The court held a hearing in Idaho on February 28th, 2024, in the Bryan Kohberger prosecution during the time I was covering the state versus Hannah Gutierrez. At that hearing, we had a lot of discussion about scheduling and some discussion about that investigative genetic genealogy, DNA, and who on the defense investigative team would be allowed to have it. We also heard that discovery is not done being turned over yet. This homicide happened in November 2022. We are in March of 2024, and the defense is still telling the judge, we don't have all the discovery. The defense was very clear that they do not believe this is on the prosecution's part, but they believe that law enforcement is not turning things over to the prosecution, and that seems to be true, including the fact that the defense just got x-rays from the victims' autopsies just. So we are still seeing discovery that is incomplete in a case that we know to have over 50 terabytes of data turned over to the defense, with more coming. It has been a very complex fact discovery for both parties, and both parties seem frustrated with the time it is taking for discovery. Ann Taylor, Bryan Kohberger's defense attorney, made a great analogy during the hearing and said it's like playing 52 card pickup with 1,000 decks of cards and throwing them all up in the air, and all the backs of the decks of cards are the same, and then we have to sort out what order they go into to analogize the amount of work that the defense is doing. We heard reiteration again that the defense intends to call maybe 400 witnesses in trial, and the defense did get a date set for a change of venue motion, arguing that the publicity in this case means the case should be moved out of Moscow, Idaho, and to another venue. That will be heard on May 14th. There was also quite a lot of discussion over Bryan Kohberger's alibi. Remember, he said through lawyers he was out driving at night. the court set another deadline for turnover of alibi defense for April 17th, saying that the defense must name the specific place or places where defendant was and the witnesses that will support that. The defense also indicated for their change of venue motion that we are going to see witnesses called. I don't know what expert witnesses are going to say with the cases had publicity. I don't know how that's going to help. I think the change of venue motion is too premature because we still don't have a trial date, but we have a discovery cutoff for defense discovery in January 2025. It seems that the court is still working off of a spring summer 2025 date for trial. We heard the defense say that they do not believe they can be ready before June, July 2025. And the prosecution say that March 2025 might be pushing it given the amount of work that's still needed to be done in this case. I think we're going to end up in that summer 2025 range for this trial. Absolutely think that's when we're going to see this trial, if not later, which is frustrating. But everyone in the courtroom reiterated they only want to do this case once. And the judge pointed out that he went back through the Idaho rules on what the ethical obligations of the defense are in a death penalty case and voiced how much the defense is required to do in a death penalty case for it not to be IAC or ineffective assistance of counsel. And the court acknowledged to Ann Taylor that he doesn't think she is just delaying for the sake of delay, but he understands how extensive her obligations to her client is. And again, we saw a very collegial, professional courtroom. It will be very interesting to see these attorneys and this judge in trial because while they have shown to be fierce advocates, they have done so with the utmost professionalism and decorum. And it really is nice to watch after some of the other cases that we've seen maybe go a little off the rails. Nobody's putting themselves in a box for it like Darrell Brooks, that's for sure. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.